Hi there. I'm Marceline. My sister once whispered to me on Thanksgiving, "You're not welcome." And I said, "Fine, but don't expect the $2,000 I've been sending you." But that wasn't the real betrayal. The real betrayal was years of quiet takedowns. When family doesn't just shut you out of a holiday, but out of your own life. They drained me, used my name, ruined my credit, and still called me selfish. And you know what hurts most? It wasn't the money. It was realizing they never saw me as family at all. How far would your own family go before you finally said enough? The drive from downtown Portland to my mother's place in the suburbs should have taken me an hour, maybe an hour and a half at most. But today, Thanksgiving traffic turned that into 3 brutal hours of bumper-to-bumper frustration. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, the kind that wasn't heavy, but enough to blur your windshield and settle in your bones. By the time I pulled into the narrow driveway of my childhood home, my shoulders were stiff, and my hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 5:32 p.m. The sky had already gone dim, the clouds hanging low like a lid over the entire city. On the passenger seat beside me sat the pumpkin pie I'd baked the night before, the one my mom used to ask for every Thanksgiving, the one she used to tell me I made better than anyone. I also brought a bottle of Chardonnay and wore the olive green coat she once complimented, the only one she ever said made me look put together. I guess, deep down, I still believed this would be the year things would be different. But when the door finally opened, I knew instantly it wouldn't. Celestia stood there, her face flat, no warmth in her eyes, not even the fake kind she used to summon for the holidays. Behind her, the faint hum of laughter and clinking plates echoed from the dining room. And then Vera appeared. My younger sister, always the favorite, always the one who knew how to tilt the room her way. She leaned in behind my mother and said it, quiet, clipped, like a blade slicing the air. "You're not welcome this Thanksgiving." At first I thought I misheard. The words floated awkwardly between us, carried by the cold November air. I swallowed, shifting the pie awkwardly in my arms. "You're kidding, right?" Celestia's lips barely moved. "It's better if you don't come in." Vera crossed her arms, her smirk polite but sharp. "We just want to keep it light this year. No drama." That word, drama, they loved using it. As if standing outside in the cold after 3 hours of driving was the drama, not shutting out their own family. I took a breath, tried to keep my voice even. I drove 3 hours. I brought pie. Vera shrugged, leaning her shoulder against the doorframe like she had all the time in the world. "No one asked you to." The words punched harder than they should have. And maybe that's why I let the next one fly, sharp and cutting. "Fine, but don't expect $2,000 from me next month." Celestia blinked like she hadn't understood. I didn't wait to explain. I turned on my heel, walked back down the porch steps, and heard the door click shut behind me without a single goodbye. By the time I reached my car, the weight in my chest pressed heavier than the pie tin in my hands. The engine hummed quietly as I pulled away from the curb, the street lamps flickering on, one by one. The radio played some old 80s song I barely registered, while my mind spiraled back through years of holidays like this. Me showing up, then pretending I wasn't enough, until they needed something again. I hit the first red light at the end of their street when my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. I let it ring until the last second, then picked up. "Marceline." My father's voice filled the car. Dorian, the man who left when I was 16, but always managed to chime in when it suited him. "Your mom told me what happened. You need to stop being so difficult." I laughed under my breath, a hollow, tired sound. "She told you she shut the door in my face?" "She's upset," he continued, like I hadn't said a word. "You're the older sister. It's your responsibility to keep this family together." That sentence snapped something clean in half inside me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Responsibility doesn't mean being the family's personal ATM dad. "You're overreacting," he said flatly. "Family is family." I didn't answer. I just pressed the red button, ending the call mid-sentence. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than the trip out. Traffic had thinned, but the weight inside me hadn't. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex downtown, The sky had turned to ink, and the rain had softened to a mist. The parking lot was nearly empty. No one waiting. No one asking me for anything. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the soft glow of the streetlights on wet pavement. Then I whispered to myself, quietly, but with the kind of certainty that settles deep in your bones. Maybe it's time I stop saving people who wouldn't save me. The apartment felt heavier than usual that night, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I hadn't bothered to unpack the pie or the bottle of wine. They were still sitting on my kitchen counter, untouched, like two silent witnesses to the wreckage of the evening. Sleep didn't come easily. When I finally drifted off, it wasn't restful. More like slipping under cold water and waking up gasping every hour. The next 2 days passed in a haze. I worked from home, answering emails, staring at spreadsheets, pretending everything was fine. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. By Saturday night, the buzzing became constant. The group chat with my mom, Vera, and a handful of cousins had lit up like Times Square. I tried to ignore it, but the notifications kept coming, one after another, relentless. I finally opened the thread. Celestia, I can't believe you would abandon your own mother on Thanksgiving, after everything I've done for you. Celestia, you're not the daughter I raised. Vera chimed in as expected. Some people only care about money. Guess that's what happens when you have no real family. The comments cut deeper than they should have, even though I knew exactly how the game worked. This wasn't new. This was their favorite dance. Make me the villain, paint themselves as the victims. Scrolling through the chat, I noticed Celestia had taken her performance public. On her Facebook page, she'd posted a photo from Thanksgiving dinner, everyone smiling, glasses raised, the caption reading, "Grateful for family who truly loves you. Some people forget who gave them everything." The comments underneath made my stomach turn. Aunt Diane, that's right, sis. Some people need to remember where they came from. Uncle Robert, Marceline always thought she was better than us. Money doesn't buy love. Vera, of course, had left her signature stamp. We don't need that kind of energy around here. It wasn't just family. Mutual friends, old neighbors, even people I barely spoke to had clicked like or chimed in with their 2 cents. The worst part? I could feel the narrative shifting, and I wasn't even in the room to defend myself. I set my phone down, trying to breathe past the knot in my chest. It felt like I was watching myself drown from a distance. Sunday morning, I told myself I wouldn't check. I'd focus on work, laundry, meal prepping for the week. Anything but my phone. But habit is a cruel thing. Around noon, while brewing coffee, I glanced at my notifications and froze. An email from HR. Subject line, quick check-in. Monday. I opened it, my pulse thudding in my ears. Hi, Marceline. Can we touch base briefly tomorrow morning? Nothing urgent, just something that came up I'd like to chat about. Thanks, Cynthia. A wave of unease washed over me. I hadn't done anything wrong. My projects were on track. There was no reason for HR to suddenly want to chat. Monday morning came faster than I wanted. Portland's sky was its usual shade of winter gray, clouds hanging low and heavy as I walked into the office. Cynthia greeted me with her usual polite smile, motioning me to sit. She folded her hands, voice casual but measured. This might sound odd, but your mom reached out to me on LinkedIn over the weekend. I blinked. Excuse me? She messaged me, Cynthia continued, choosing her words carefully. Said you'd been distant lately, that she was worried about you, mentioned something about you refusing to help her. I swallowed hard, my heart sliding somewhere near my knees. She contacted my HR manager? My voice barely came out. Cynthia gave me a small, sympathetic smile. Look, I didn't want to bring it up, but it's a bit unorthodox. That was putting it mildly. I left that meeting feeling like I'd been cracked open, not because of what Cynthia had said, but because I knew exactly how far my mother was willing to go. By the time I got home that evening, the weight I'd carried since Thanksgiving had mutated into something sharper, heavier. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through the unread messages still flooding in. You broke your mother's heart. You're selfish. All you care about is money. Each word felt like a stone piled on my chest. And yet, Somewhere under all that noise, a new thought had begun to take root. If they kept crossing lines, maybe I needed to draw one they couldn't step over. The apartment had fallen into an uneasy silence, not peaceful, tense, like the pause before a storm. It had been a week since Thanksgiving, and while the group chat had gone quiet, I knew better than to trust the calm. It wasn't over. It never was. The messages from my mother and Vera hadn't stopped. They'd just changed. No more crying voicemails or Facebook rants. Now it was guilt-laced silence, broken by the occasional hope you're happy text or a passive-aggressive quote shared online. But the noise never stopped in my head. Every night, I replayed Thanksgiving like a movie I couldn't turn off. The slammed door, my mother's glare, Vera's smug smile, and Dad's voice, reminding me, again, that I was the one holding the family together. By December, I thought maybe they'd finally moved on. Maybe I could breathe. I should have known better. It started small. Monday morning at the office, I ran into Julia from finance. We weren't close, but friendly enough. She smiled over her coffee. "Hey, Marceline, I heard you're paying for your niece's tuition. That's really generous." I almost dropped my mug. I blinked. "Sorry, what?" She shrugged casually. "Vera mentioned it on Facebook last week. Said she's lucky to have a sister like you." My stomach dropped. "I never said that." Julia looked surprised. "Oh, sorry. I just assumed." I forced a smile and walked away, but my pulse was pounding by the time I sat back at my desk. The heaviness I'd been trying to shake since Thanksgiving came rushing back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. Why Vera would post something like that. Around midnight, I opened my laptop, running on nothing but gut instinct. 5 minutes later, everything cracked open. There it was, right in front of me. An active payday loan in my name. Opened 3 weeks ago. $3,500 borrowed. Over $4,200 owed now, thanks to penalties. The email and phone number on the application weren't mine, but I recognized them. Vera's. I stared at the screen, the weight of it pressing down like a boulder. She'd taken out a loan under my name days before Thanksgiving. While I'd been budgeting for holiday gifts, she'd been wrecking my credit. It wasn't just the money, it was the violation, the betrayal. And when I looked deeper, it got worse. The electric bills I'd been covering when Dad lost his job, the groceries I'd paid for while Mom's check was late, the car lease I'd co-signed because Vera couldn't qualify. It wasn't a handful of favors. It was a pattern I hadn't wanted to see. By 2 a.m., my entire chest felt hollow. It had never been about family. It had always been about how much they could take. I sat in the dark, my laptop casting a cold glow across the room, listening to the rain tapping at the window. Then I picked up my phone, scrolled past the unread messages and guilt trips, and opened a blank text field. Quietly, I said it out loud, like a vow. They've crossed every line. It's time I draw mine. The city streets sparkled that night, strings of white lights wrapping around bare trees, storefront windows dressed in garlands and ribbons, Christmas music humming faintly from every corner cafe. Portland always looked like a postcard around the holidays, charming, magical even. But all it did was remind me how empty everything felt this year. 2 weeks had passed since I uncovered the payday loan in my name, and the space between me and my family felt colder than the December air. I tried to fill the silence with work, errands, cooking meals I barely touched. But nothing muted the hollow ache in my chest, the gnawing sense that they hadn't finished with me yet. That certainty arrived one Saturday morning over coffee. I was scrolling half-heartedly through social media, trying to avoid another day of staring at my financial statements, when a photo stopped me cold. A family Christmas brunch, taken at my mother's house. My mother smiling in the middle, Vera standing beside her, aunts, uncles, cousins all packed around the table, holding up glasses of champagne. The caption read, "Grateful for my real family today. Some people forget who gave them everything." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into knots. The comments under the post were worse. Aunt Diane, "Some people forget where they came from." Uncle Robert, "It's sad when your own blood turns their back on you." Vera, of course, had left her little gem. Some folks only show up when there's a paycheck involved. The weight of it hit harder than I expected. Not just the exclusion, but the public disownment. It wasn't enough to shut me out quietly. No, they had to parade it around like a trophy. I set my phone down, but it felt like the words had burned themselves into my skin. That night, as the holiday lights blinked outside my apartment window, the next blow landed. A text alert from my bank. Suspicious activity detected on your credit profile. Application for new credit card declined. My heart sank. I opened the message and pulled up the details. Someone had attempted to open a credit card in my name. The application was flagged and rejected because of discrepancies. But the email and phone number linked to the attempt made my stomach drop. Vera's again. I stared at the screen for a long time, numb and exhausted. They weren't done, not even close. I could have screamed, cried, thrown my phone across the room. But instead, I did what I'd always done. I sat there in the stillness, trying to figure out how to carry it, how to fix it. And then I realized I wasn't going to fix it, not this time. Later that night, when the city outside had gone quiet, and the only sound was the low hum of my heater, I picked up my phone one last time. My fingers hovered over the message field, then moved quickly, deliberately. To Celestia, Vera. If either of you cross one more line, I will burn this bridge myself, permanently. I hit send without reading it twice. For a moment I sat motionless, heart pounding in my throat. Then I whispered into the dark, "Next time they try me, there won't be a warning." The first Monday of January arrived colder than I expected. The sky outside my office window blanketed in slate gray. Portland winters had a way of bleeding into everything. The streets, the people, even the light felt heavy. I should have known the new year wouldn't come quietly. I was halfway through my morning emails when the HR notification popped up in the corner of my screen. "Cynthia Harper, can you stop by my office at 10 a.m.? My stomach sank. There was nothing unusual in the wording, but after everything, I'd learned to recognize when the ground shifted beneath me. At exactly 10, I knocked on Cynthia's door, forcing my face into something resembling calm. She looked up, her smile tight, eyes apologetic. "Marceline, thanks for coming. Have a seat." I sat, smoothing my skirt over my knees. She took a breath before speaking. "I wanted to give you a heads up. We've received a couple of anonymous concerns." I didn't flinch, but inside my chest tightened like a vice. "Concerns about what?" I asked, voice neutral. She tapped her pen against a folder. "There's been chatter. Comments about your family situation, suggesting it's affecting your work environment. Some rather personal things." I nodded slowly, already knowing exactly where this was headed. Cynthia hesitated before continuing. "I'm obligated to remind you to keep personal matters separate from professional responsibilities. You're a valuable part of this team, but they said I'm unstable." I finished for her, my voice flat. She didn't deny it, just sighed. "I know it's unfair, but perception matters." I thanked her, stood up, and left without another word. By the time I reached my desk, my pulse was pounding in my ears. I didn't need to ask who'd fed those rumors. I could hear Vera's voice clear as day. "She's so cold lately. You know how she gets. Can't even keep her job together because of us." It wasn't enough for them to drain me financially. Now, they wanted to tear down everything I'd built. That evening, as the rain returned, soft at first, then relentless, I tried to shake off the conversation. I cooked a simple dinner, cleaned up the apartment, folded laundry. But nothing worked. The tension settled in my bones like winter itself. I had just finished putting away dishes when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against my door. I froze. A glance through the peephole made my stomach twist. Celestia, Vera. And behind them, 2 of our cousins. People who hadn't spoken to me in months, now standing on my doorstep like an intervention squad. I unlocked the door but didn't open it fully. "What do you want?" Vera's face was set, arms crossed. "We need to talk." Celestia's voice softened in that way she always used when she wanted something. "Sweetheart, we can't keep going like this." I stepped back, allowing them inside only because I knew they wouldn't leave otherwise. They filed in like a storm. "You're tearing this family apart," one cousin said immediately, not even sitting down. Vera's eyes flashed. You think you're better than us because you make more money? Celestia reached for my arm. I'm your mother, Marceline. You can't abandon us. The words sliced sharper than I expected. I took a breath, steadying myself. I gave you a warning, Vera scoffed. Oh, please. You think cutting us off makes you powerful? You've always been selfish. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked calmly to the door, opened it wide, and said, I've carried all of you long enough. This is where I stop. Celestia's eyes widened. Marceline, but I shook my head, voice firm. No, you've crossed every line, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. Before they could respond, I stepped aside and gestured toward the hallway. Leave. They hesitated, exchanging looks, but something in my face must have told them I meant it. One by one they filed out, Celestia's face crumpling, Vera glaring like she wanted to spit fire. I closed the door behind them, the click of the lock louder than thunder. For a long moment I leaned back against it, breathing hard. Then I whispered to myself, next time, I won't just close the door, I'll lock it. The days following that confrontation passed like fog rolling through my apartment, thick, heavy, and impossible to shake. I hadn't heard a single knock on my door since the night I sent them away. But the silence wasn't peace. It was the quiet before another storm. By mid-January, the texts started again. This time, they weren't asking for help. They were louder, uglier. Vera, you're heartless. What kind of sister throws her family away? Celestia, I raised you better than this. You've become cold, bitter, selfish. And then, the family group chat exploded. Comments flying from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. After all she's done for herself, she forgot who helped her get there. Must be nice to have money and no soul. I didn't bother replying. Instead, I pressed down on the group thread until the delete chat option popped up and tapped it without hesitation. But the damage bled beyond my phone. At work, I noticed subtle shifts. Conversations paused when I walked by. Coworkers who used to greet me with smiles now offered polite nods and lowered eyes. Even Cynthia had pulled me aside earlier that week, voice cautious. Hey, Marceline, I don't want to pry, but I heard something about family troubles. If there's anything I can do. I'd smiled politely and told her I was fine, but the weight in my chest told me otherwise. It wasn't just family anymore. It was my reputation. That night, after another long day of side eyes and whispers I didn't want to hear, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I was done waiting for the next attack. I pulled up my online banking account and one by one began severing every cord they had wrapped around me. The utility payments in Celestia's name? Cancelled. The automatic transfers to cover their groceries and rent? Stopped. The credit card where Vera's name sat neatly as an authorized user? Removed. The family Netflix account, the Amazon Prime subscription, Spotify family plan, all disabled within minutes. Each click felt like slicing away another chain around my throat. When I was done, I opened a new email and addressed it to both of them. Subject. Effective immediately. You have 2 weeks to handle your own finances. I will no longer fund people who disrespect me. My support was never an obligation. Consider it officially ended. I hovered over the send button for a moment, breathing deeply, then clicked. There was no satisfaction in it, not really, just space. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Later that night, I sat by the window, watching the Portland rain paint streaks across the glass. The apartment around me was quiet. No notifications buzzing, no demands waiting. I knew what would come next, the tantrums, the insults, the guilt, but it didn't matter anymore. They'd wanted me to disappear. So I had. I whispered into the darkness, voice steady. They wanted me gone. Let's see how they survive without me. The first few days after I cut them off were unnervingly quiet. No more midnight texts, no missed calls, no Facebook posts aimed at me like sharpened knives. I knew it wasn't real peace. It was the pause before the explosion. It arrived in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I was wrapping up a report when an email from my bank appeared in my inbox. Subject: Urgent Debt Collection Notice. My stomach dropped. I clicked. The letter was simple, sterile, devastating. This is a formal notice regarding unpaid debts totaling $3,500 linked to your name. Failure to respond within 10 business days will result in further legal action. My pulse roared in my ears as I read further. The account details matched the payday loan Vera had opened without my knowledge. They hadn't paid a cent since I cut them off, and now the debt collectors had come knocking at my door. Before I could react, my phone vibrated. A new message in the family group chat I thought I'd left. Vera, if you think you can humiliate us and walk away, you're wrong. Celestia, you're trying to destroy this family. We'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. Another message popped up. Marceline's trying to ruin us because she's bitter and alone. They had regrouped, and now they were fighting dirty. That night, the real assault began. I received emails from acquaintances, church friends, old neighbors, even colleagues, all hinting that my family had reached out. I heard some troubling things about you and your mom. Are you okay? Your sister's been saying you've gone cold. You can't forget where you come from, Marceline. They weren't subtle. The smear campaign had begun. By Thursday, a coworker pulled me aside, voice low. Hey, I don't want to get involved, but your sister's been posting things about you, saying you abandoned your mom when she needed you most. I felt the ground shift beneath me, not out of surprise, but out of pure exhaustion. They wanted to corner me, humiliate me, drag my name through every room I'd worked so hard to build. But I was done reacting. I was ready to act. That night, I gathered every piece of paper, every financial statement, every screenshot of their lies and manipulations. I compiled the payday loan documents, the credit card fraud alerts, the texts, the emails. I printed everything and placed it in a neat file folder. Then, as the rain battered my apartment windows, I sat down and wrote 2 letters. The first to my family. Effective immediately, I am filing a formal police report regarding the fraudulent use of my financial information. Any further contact will be documented and treated as harassment. You have crossed the final line. The second, to the police. It wasn't easy. Filing a report against your own mother, your sister, it felt like driving a knife into your own ribs. But it had to be done. Later that night, as I slid the finished documents into my bag, there was a knock at the door. I didn't have to look to know who it was. I opened it to find Vera, Celestia, and 2 cousins standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, faces twisted in rage. Vera pushed forward first. You think this makes you the good guy? Celestia's voice trembled. I gave you everything, and now you're throwing us to the wolves. I didn't flinch. You're the ones who lit the fire, I said quietly. I'm just refusing to burn with you. Vera stepped closer, eyes blazing. If you think you can erase us, you're delusional. I met her glare head on. I'm not erasing you. I'm freeing myself. I stepped back inside, fingers curling around the door. And next time you try to wreck my life, it won't just be police paperwork you'll face. I shut the door, locking it without hesitation. For a long time, I stood there, listening to the muffled shouts outside. Eventually, they faded into the night. I leaned back against the door, breathing deeply. They wanted me gone, I whispered to myself. Let's see how they survive without me. 1 week after the confrontation at my door, I sat in a small, sterile room at the Portland Police Department, my fingers tracing the edge of a manila folder on the table. The officer across from me glanced down at the paperwork I had brought, copies of the fraudulent loan, credit card attempts, threatening texts, screenshots of public defamation posts. You understand this is serious, he said, his tone professional but not unkind. Your sister could face criminal charges for identity theft and financial fraud. I nodded once. I understand. Filing a police report against family wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do. But here I was, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to survive. When I left the station, it wasn't raining, but the clouds pressed low and heavy, the kind of gray that felt like it could swallow you whole. Back at my apartment, I barely had time to hang up my coat before the backlash began. First, a long email from Celestia. How could you do this to your own blood? Do you know what you've done? Your sister might lose custody of May. You've destroyed this family. Then a call from Dorian, sharp and bitter. You went too far, Marceline. Blood is blood. You don't take family to court. And finally, the inevitable message from Vera. You're heartless. I'll see you in court too. Don't think you can walk away without consequences. Each message felt like a knife in my back. But this time, I didn't bleed. Instead, I opened my laptop and watched as the community began to shift. News traveled fast in our circle. At first, the gossip painted me as the villain, but the truth has a way of crawling to the surface. I started receiving messages from acquaintances. I didn't realize what they'd done to you. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have said something sooner. You're brave for standing up to them. And then one night, a message from Narina, my cousin's wife, lit up my screen. You did what none of us ever dared. You stood up for yourself. I hope you know you're not alone. I stared at her words for a long time. That was the thing. I had felt alone for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But that night, I finally allowed myself to feel something other than anger. It wasn't relief yet, not quite, but it was something close. The next morning, I wrote one last message in the family group chat. I didn't soften it. I didn't sugarcoat it. I loved you. I sacrificed everything for you, and you called it obligation. I am done paying for a family that never saw me. Then, without hesitation, I blocked them both. My mother, my sister. It felt like slamming a door, like turning off a faucet that had been leaking for years. That evening, I sat by my window as the rain tapped gently against the glass. For the first time in what felt like forever, my phone was silent. No guilt-laden texts, no veiled threats, just me. I leaned back, breathing deep into the quiet. Maybe now, I whispered to no one but myself, I can finally breathe. By late February, the rain had finally eased. The cold lingered, but for the first time in months, the sky over Portland was clear. I moved into a new apartment that week, smaller, quieter, and entirely mine. No more spare keys left under flower pots, just in case. No more utility bills with someone else's name on them. No more weight pressing on my chest every time my phone buzzed. The process of filing charges against Vera had moved quickly once the evidence was handed over. 2 weeks after I filed, I received an email from the detective handling the case. Your sister has been formally charged with identity theft and financial fraud. If she fails to appear in court, there will be a warrant for her arrest. It wasn't a victory. It felt more like surgery. Necessary, painful, leaving scars. I heard through distant relatives that Celestia's world had collapsed. Friends stopped showing up at her brunches. Neighbors stopped inviting her to holiday parties. Whatever carefully constructed version of reality she'd built around herself had shattered. Vera lost her job. The retail store she worked at couldn't keep her on after the fraud charges. There were whispers about a custody battle starting, May's father suddenly petitioning for full custody once the charges went public. Dorian tried one last time. A voicemail that appeared on my phone one rainy Thursday night. You've torn this family apart. Whatever happens next, that's on you. I didn't call back. A week later, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Celestia. Inside was a letter. Short, shaky, written in blue ink. You'll always be our daughter, even if you've forgotten what that means. I folded the paper quietly, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash. Some wounds never stopped bleeding because the person holding the knife refused to let go. But I had. The weeks that followed felt strange, like learning to walk again after carrying too much weight for too long. I signed up for a cooking class every Saturday morning. I met up with friends I hadn't seen in years, started therapy, took long walks without checking my phone every few minutes. The world was quieter. One evening, as I unpacked the last box in my new apartment, a message lit up my phone. Narina. I just wanted you to know. You taught me something. You taught me that love without boundaries isn't love. It's survival. I stared at her words for a long time before typing back. Thank you. I'm finally learning that too. That night, I sat by the window as the last light of day faded behind the city skyline. The air smelled like wet pavement and new beginnings. They had wanted me to bleed so they could live, but I had finally stopped the bleeding. The scars would remain, sure, but so would my freedom. And for the first time in my life, the quiet wasn't something to fear. It was mine. And before I leave you tonight, let me tell you this, not as the woman in the story, but as someone who's lived it. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that family is not defined by who shares your blood. It's defined by who respects your boundaries, who lifts you up without asking you to shrink yourself. We're raised to believe that love means sacrifice, that being the good daughter, the good sibling, means carrying everyone else's burdens until we collapse. But that's not love. That's survival at the expense of your soul. You are allowed to choose peace over obligation. You are allowed to say, enough. And you are still worthy of love, even when you stop bleeding for people who would never bandage your wounds. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you had to carry more than your share just to keep the peace? Or maybe you've had to walk away from people you loved to finally start living your own life. If this story touched something inside you, leave me a comment below. Type 1. If you've ever chosen yourself after years of choosing others, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like this story, that's okay too. Tell me why. Tell me what you'd do differently. Let's talk about it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, human, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join this little corner of the internet where we talk about the things no one else dares to.